You unlock this door with the key of conversation. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of question. A dimension of connection. A dimension of thought. You're moving into a podcast of both inquiry and kinship, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Grog Zone.
Hello everybody! Welcome to the Grog Zone, where we break the normal social mores of society and ask our friends a lot of questions, and also just an excuse to say a lot of nice things about them. Today I have the ever wonderful, the ever fabulous, the ever creative Riftwing Designs!
Hello everyone!
Hello! As a little intro, tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of go diving in whatever direction we're going.
If you want a little intro, you are in for some trouble. Now, so I'm a nerd, and I love to do a lot of motivational speaking, which is funny because I'm sure we'll get into it. I used to be super nervous, but I found out through conventions that I can present and you can learn all that fun stuff, and so I got into presenting, motivational speaking, and more recently I've gotten into instructing yoga. So I have been growing, and all of these talents are focused around the nerddom. So anime, obviously the bronies of My Little Pony, furries, anything and everything nerdy, that's where I fit in. So I'm really glad to chat today.
Awesome. So I guess we'll kind of start with that, and with a lot of these I've been starting of like how I've met the person I'm talking to. So I met you, probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point?
I'm sure it's more at this point.
Yeah, time is so funky. You'd think I'd do the research beforehand, but I feel like it's just sort of, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. But I met you out of the blue at a convention that I went to with my good buddy, Forward Progress, and some other friends from back in Pony times. I think he had some connections to something. I don't know. I'd never heard of it. It was outside of the state I live in. Just this little, startup, 2-room. It wasn't very big. And then, you show up, and at the time, I've been to, 3 cons, and you are just, the most put-together, I'm like, oh my gosh, who's this person? They've got a cool name, they have, a get-up, they have, I don't want to say gimmick, because that undersells it, but, you had, a shtick, and I'm like, who's this crazy celebrity gracing this small little startup, podunk con with this, who is this person? And then instantly we kind of, formed a mini friendship, and I would always try to make an effort of when we had Bronycons to be I don't know what I'm doing, but at some point I'm going to make sure I run into you and say hello. So I guess we want to jump on that. So at that time, how long had you been doing your, I guess it was Brass Knuckles, wasn't it?
Yes.
How long had you been doing that? Because I know I feel at that point compared to who you are now, feels like a lot, but even at that time it felt like you were really well produced and put together for what you were doing.
You're gonna have to make me open up my spreadsheet here. So I love lists. I wonder where that came from.
Lists are cool.
I'm one of those people that used to be horribly disorganized, and I found that lists is one of the things that helps me, and I actually have given speeches about organization, using SMART methods in order to make priorities. And of course, making lists. So I actually use Google Docs a whole ton to create this. And I have a master presentation list. So I have to look up master.
So you have a record of every time you've presented something somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's pretty
And
neat.
So I've got one for applications, one for the things that I've done. And then this one was actually to... because you can get credit, this is something you can put on your resume. So why not say how many panels you've done in so many things? And That's really it. Even if you're a nerd and you're watching anime, if you're involved in forums and conventions, you are set. The first convention that I presented at was Bronycon 2014.
Wow.
And that was, of course, Brass Knuckles and started my seminar. So I had gone to Bronycon the year before at August, and saw a guy dressed up as Iron Will, and he's this really tough, super trying to be assertive, but he's aggressive. And I was like, well, I love this character, but I also am learning myself at the time how to speak up more. I was in Toastmasters International, organization that helps to, in a friendly manner, allow you to speak in front of people and practice and get better. So I did that. And let's see, Super Speedy Cider Con was 2015, so I was only a year into it at that point.
Wow, really? It was only a year?
That was my 6th presentation, and since then I have done 90.
90?
Including smooth streams, of course.
I'm so flattered that you would include smooth streams in that. Smooth streams, for those who do not know, is a stream we did last year. We really should do them again this year. That was pretty much like a big programming block. So no, that's 90. I feel like that's the thing. It's like when people start something, it's like it feels like it's such a big unsurmountable that you're not doing anything, and then time passes and you keep at it and you look back and you're like, wow, all this stuff. Like, that's incredible. And I wanted to ask this, which is, partially why this podcast is what got you into Toastmasters?
I have a real job, and I was so scared of speaking that I would get sick, like physically ill. And at one point, I planned a major surgery to avoid having to present at a conference. So hopefully none of my colleagues are watching, but that was like 15 years ago. So yeah, I was like, at some point, I need to improve if I want to improve. And the other thing was Toastmasters International is an organization approved by a lot of businesses, and they would pay for your time there. They wouldn't pay for the dues. It's like less than $10 a month, but they would let you spend X number of hours at these meetings. And I was like, okay. so it was a bit of a freebie, and it was welcoming. And I felt like, because I have a structure where you do 10 speeches and you would have a checklist, which I was already into, and there were levels, like the achievements in video games. That's what hooked me, is the fact that I could do little pieces and talk about myself and things that I enjoy. Like, it had nothing to do with business whatsoever. And I would talk about conventions. And in fact, I mentored a friend of mine who did her first speech in a wig because she was so scared of being herself, but she could do cosplay. And so she gave a speech in cosplay, and that has given her confidence. So it's just a very welcoming, fun place. And I do recommend it if anyone wants to. There's chapters all over the world. There's hundreds of thousands of clubs.
Neat. I always was curious because one of my old jobs, if you'd go in the front door, there was always a sign for Toastmasters, something or other in the building. And every time I saw that, I thought of you, and I'm like, what do they actually do there? So it's just like you have a set. Like, give me an example for like one of the speeches you gave. Like, is it like a specific, like, this is the topic, or do you just talk about something? I mean, I guess that's what it is. But like, is it more like, did you have to like prep it, and like, did you personally like do test runs before like the actual like presentation in front of people, or like how did you approach that? Because it's like really admirable to have trouble public speaking and to kind of throw yourself into that. That probably had to be a little scary.
Yeah, no, it's a great compound question. And the bottom line is, each of the projects that they have is based on a principle of speech. First, introducing yourself, then vocal variety, using body language, using figures of speech, things like that. You can pick the topic, and it can be on anything from home improvement to your nerdiest dreams that are able to be spoken in public. The idea is it's generally a 5 to 7 minute speech, and the really interesting part is you have to find out yourself the way that you want to prepare. So for me, I like to write out the whole speech and then put it in bullet form, and then use those bullets as notes. Some people like note cards, some people memorize things verbatim, but until you spend literally hundreds of speeches figuring out the way that works best for you, you never really know. And the other interesting thing is, not only do they do planned speeches, but they do what they call impromptu speech. So they give you a question you have to answer immediately, just like this interview. So I don't know what's coming, but I do know that I can think while I'm talking, speak eloquently, and also give myself the time to kind of spin off. And that's where it comes in. So it's definitely a challenging experience, but you have to set your own goals. And that was the first time that I ever set my own goals and then actually achieved it by, I think it was 5 or 6 years it took me to go through the entire program, which was intense. It was intense, but I was like, I'm going to do it, because at the end you get a little medallion.
No, I totally get that. Like, I've signed up for like one of those like walk 100 miles or whatever this year, just because to keep me at it. But because I know I will get a medal, I'll be put on my, because it feels like you're doing a video game quest. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you kind of touch on a point of like how you planned it and finding your kind of own style and doing that. Is that how you still make presentations now, or do you feel like you've kind of formed into another thing? Because like I'm someone who's worked on panels before, but they're almost entirely just me. So I never know. I feel like I'm locked in my little silo, and I have no idea how other people go about it. So it's like, is that still how you do it? Do you have a kind of newer, another way that you figured it out? Kind of how do you approach that process?
Sure. When I first did it, again, my first Bronycon, I literally wrote out the entire 1 hour script and memorized the whole thing.
Wow.
I would go on walks and talk to myself. I would drive and talk in the car to myself. I mean, people probably thought I was crazy, but I was so nervous that if I did not know every single word back then, I would not have done it. And fun fact. So I believe you were in PhillyCon as well.
Oh, yeah.
So when we were in PhillyCon, I was after one of the guests of honor, and I knew who the guest of honor was, and I was playing it cool. Like, I wasn't going to fangirl or anything like that. But just interacting with them as a person was so humbling and so nice that when I went out on stage, my mind completely blanked.
Oh,
and this
no.
has never happened before. Have you ever had that happen where you're just like, I don't even know what this is?
Yeah, no, totally been there.
So that happened, and it's the first and hopefully only ever time. But when that happened, I realized that maybe having the whole script wasn't good, because if I can't remember the next sentence and the next sentence and the next sentence, I'm stuck. And so that's when I started to get into ad-libbing and taking those bullets and making them actually into themes. And just, there are certain things that I say, there are certain phrases that I use all the time. And if I forget something, I just pull one out of my pocket and go with it. So things like accept yourself. That's always one you can come back to. You can tie it to anything. You can tie it to yoga. You can tie it to My Little Pony. You can tie it to Owl House. Like, there's no limit to the way that you can bring that in and make a nerdy comparison and then figure out where the heck you were as your mind is racing in the background. There's no way that looking confident on stage means that you're 100% confident.
No.
And I think that's one of the interesting parts of planning. So for me, now I make outlines and I have the bullets, and I actually have a clipboard and it'll have the outline on it. So I look professional and I've got my notes.
Smart
but
plan. I'm
every
gonna try
person does it differently. So I'm interested to hear how you do yours as well.
that. I guess it's kind of similar. I can turn in the tables on me and interview me. I remember my first panel. I did not entirely years where I memorized it, but I ran it a number of times where I would essentially, and it's kind of how I still do it now, even though it's been a while since I've done one, but I would form the general idea of what the panel was going to be. I'd make my PowerPoint after I'd kind of had my big ideas about it, and then I would kind of walk through it as I was giving it and write a script. And then I'd run that probably once or twice, just to, like, if there's, like, the way that, like, jokes would formulate in it or ways to transition. And then that, through repetition, would get knocked down to just bullet points where, will certain lines come up verbatim of what they were in the quote-unquote script? Yes, because those are usually, like, the bits. But it's more, it's kind of like you were saying now, it's more ideas. It's just like, you have this information in your head, talk about this, know that this one's coming up next to kind of, kind of line that in. And you get kind of better at it. I feel like I'm in a similar boat that you're in, which is why I like asking you questions about it, is I was someone who was deathly afraid of public speaking. And like my first panel, I had my one very good friend at the time up there with me. She had no idea what the panel was. She was not involved in the creation process at all. It was mostly just, I just needed at that time like a life raft up there with me, that if things somehow went sideways, because I didn't know what was going to happen up there, that I just had something familiar that I could kind of bounce off of in that moment. But no, and I feel like that's like a theme of like do what you need to do to get up there and do it, and then you kind of, like you said, you learn your style, you kind of ease off a little bit more. Because I remember like the first time, my first couple, it's like I'd have to make sure I ran through it multiple times, and now it's just like I need to run through it at least once to make sure the timing is proper, that I don't, it's not too long or too short.
Right.
But besides that, if I put the work in, like, it'll be there. I know I can be, the information's in my head. I can be funny or interesting on the spot if needed. So
Absolutely.
How did you? I'm gonna turn it back. How did you do anything to kind of be able to kind of have that in the moment sort of responding to things and not having to be so script and rigid, or do you feel like it just sort of came naturally with doing more of these?
No, so the last point I wanted to bring up on this, actually, which ties in perfectly, is passion. So when you do things that you're passionate about, when you care about the subjects you're talking about, it'll show. And this has actually come back to bite me in like job interviews where I'm so passionate that I'm like, ah! And my interviewers are like, that was too much. So the bottom line with that is so for this, they have competitions in Toastmasters too, where you compete with other people on these impromptu responses. And like personality quizzes, like which Lion King character are you and stuff.
Yeah.
So I printed out literally 200 questions about it. What's your favorite ice cream flavor and why? What's your favorite season? If you had one day to spend with a friend, who would you take? What person in history would you bring back? And the championship one, because I won the championship. I mean, just humble brag. When I was in the championship, the question was, if there was one message you could give, what would that be? And I pulled out brass knuckles and I said, yo, when you talk to people, be authentic, always be positive, because if you say something bad to someone, they will never forget it. But those positive and uplifting words that you give can change someone's life forever. And I'm sure you can hear just in me repeating that, like, that's what I love. And when your passion charges your topic, you're set. You're absolutely set. Like, I will never forget when you first presented your wrestling panel to me, and I was like, dude, this off the charts. He loves it.
Gosh,
so I really didn't care about the topic, but I was interested by the end because you were just like, dude, this stuff is intense.
No, and that's a good point. I feel like, I feel like that's what I got the first time I saw your presentation stuff, and when I see Jarep there, it's like the best panels are the ones where like it's like an amplification. Like you can feel how much this person cares about this topic. And like you said, I guess it doesn't always matter. I feel like I've seen that in other things. Like if the topic maybe isn't something that interests me, the right person talking about it in the right way can really kind of make it like pop and get people invested, because it's like it's pure love. I had sadly at this point in time I haven't actually gotten to release any episode, but like with the first one when I was talking to our good friend Thoth Penswell, like he just loves movies and it comes oozing out of him, and just like to stand in the presence, in a virtual sense obviously, of him just being so excited and joyful about and positive about movies is just it's something special. And yeah, I think you're right, people pick up on that.
Yeah, no, I've been described as having an infectious personality, and nowadays that's probably a bad description, but that's what I've been called.
No, I can definitely see it. You brighten a room, like you just have a certain aura about you, and it's kind of awesome. I think that's why we're friends. And I had that thing even when I didn't know you that well, that I was like, I need to go say hi to Rift. Rift is the freaking coolest.
Yeah.
No, that's really neat. And I want to move away to another topic, because I feel like, well, it's really good. It's stuff that I've kind of known about you. And the other part of this that we've had like passing conversations about that I'm always so curious about is your doing cons. I know your pony stuff, but with furry conventions. I've never been to one. I finally wanted to go, and then obviously cons aren't happening now, and I still very much intend to at some point when they start happening again. But how did you... Oh man, where do you even start with this? How did you come to... We'll just start with how did you come to present at them, and then we'll start... I guess, well, no, we'll move back even further. How did you come to go to furry conventions? Like, what pulled you in, I guess?
Okay, so bottom line, I've always been a furry my entire life. I was described as deer-like as a child, so I started to pretend to be a deer. I pretended to be a squirrel. I loved nature. I loved animals. I just thought it was normal. And plus, again, this was the impressionable youth where Disney had all kinds of anthropomorphization. So I thought it was normal. Okay. So I also was a complete nerd, and I was bullied. If you haven't seen my panels, I was bullied, and I used books as my escape. So
Oh, we've got
I
an
got a prop.
example.
The Dragon Riders of Pern was my escape. These
Oh.
Babies by Anne McCaffrey were my escape, and because of that, I really got obsessed with dragons, which is part of the reason why my persona, or literally like my other half, is a dragon. And that is just because I associated with it growing up. That was the way that I tied myself to something that was actually me that I could express, at least in my imagination. And so fast forward through college, I get through everything. I start living by myself, and I'm trying to find new friends. And this was 2006, 2007. So it was the same time that the Brony movement started, and I was going on meetup.com. There were two meetups that I was interested in. First off was the furries, and second was the bronies. And I went to a furry one.
Not too well, actually, but the bronies weren't until around, like, 2010, wasn't it?
It could have been a little later.
Okay,
You're
sorry.
right.
Like, that's like one of the few vague timelines that I have in my brain, so I apologize. Continue.
Whenever the first season came out, that's when I was in. So
Okay.
at the beginning.
Yes.
And
apologies.
it was the furries and it was the bronies. And I went to a furry meet, and it was like around food, and some of them were kind of creepy because there's this stigma. And I'm sure they were nice, but it was mostly dudes, and I had a long distance relationship and felt very uncomfortable. And then I went to a brony one, and they were like singing songs and doing crafts and just being nerds. And I was like, well, this is no choice. I'm going to be a member of the DC Bronies and help to build it. And that's what I did for a decade. And through the bronies, I met other furries. And through those furries, I found people I felt comfortable with going to a furry convention. Because at that time, it still felt a little unsafe. I had a committed partnership at that point, and I was comfortable going with my friends. And I don't think I would have ever gone if I didn't have people to go with, because it can be intimidating. It's a totally different culture. It's a welcoming culture. It's so different because everybody is so different.
Yeah.
And it's so fun because you see creativity and artistic tendencies and so many different levels of ability, and it's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's something that you have to take the time to absorb. So that's how I got into it. And when I was able to go to the convention, it was Anthrocon, the biggest one, of course.
You start
I
big.
realized,
Bronycon's your first
thing.
pony one. Anthrocon's your first furry one. Like you start.
Yeah, Otakon
you start
was
right
my
at the
first
top.
anime con.
Wow,
Like, yeah.
geez.
Go big or go home. So anyways, long story. I then realized, hey, these people are totally the exact same as bronies. Like, that's my view. And not only that, they overlap. And so I just took one of my assertiveness seminars. Let me look at my spreadsheet. And that was the first one I presented at a furry convention. And I also turned some around. So I first did Furthermore in 2016. I did Cosplay for Confidence. And I did Good Fur Day. So that was kind of like, it was talking about the brass knuckles themes, but instead of saying like, hey, accept yourself as a pony or find your cutie mark, here's the Good Fur Day because it's a furry theme. And so I did that a few times. And I did the assertiveness seminar once at Anthrocon. I did Good Fur Day as well, and I did one on goal setting. So all of those are totally cross fandom.
Okay, cool. Because it sounded like you were doing similar things, but like that's the I don't want to say other side of the wall because that implies some level of division, but like that's the other part that like I haven't seen it, and I was curious kind of what you did over there. And it seems like you're in, and this is just kind of a general topic that I always think about with furry stuff, is that like with ponies there was always the kind of unifying thing of the show, and the thing that always like I don't know if stressed out is the right word for it. But, like, the thing that always made me kind of, I guess, worried, I don't know, of wading into furry stuff is, like, there's not as much of, like, a unifying thing. You can't go in and go, okay, we all have X in common because, like, there's not, like, what do you talk about? And I guess it's people. Everybody's people. But, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That always, like, psyched me out, before, and I guess a little bit now. It's just like, well, what am I going to talk to them about? It's not like I can just go to like, oh, this is my favorite pony, or I like this episode. Like, and it was always.
I mean, you could.
I'm sure with a lot of them, if they were into the pony fandom stuff, yeah. But I don't know. It's furry is definitely something I dip my toe into a lot more readily last year, and have talk to some people like, let's go check out a FurCon and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
Because they seem like, from what you've said, like they seem like a really cool, group of homies. And I remember watching like a documentary about them last year, and it was very like, wow, this is incredible. So.
Absolutely. I think the best way to get introduced again is either to go to meetups, or if you're at a convention, they always do like kind of mini meets where it's themed around usually the animals. So people that are wearing like the dragon costumes, or the cats, or the dogs, or the skeletons, or the reptiles. So that's step one. Always compliment someone's suit. Ask them if they made it. Ask them who made it, and you've got a conversation. It's just like Brony is like, hey, I like your shirt, or your hat, or your ears. It's the same exact thing. You compliment someone, and then you talk about it. And especially if they've got, because again, they're just nerds. They wear T-shirts and stuff too. It's not like they all are in costume. Yeah. But those are the conversation starters that you can talk about. Like, see someone with a Last Unicorn, right? I mean, I'm like the biggest fangirl Last Unicorn, so I will totally do that. And they have screenings of cartoons, and they have video game tournaments, the same as everything else. They have charity, so there are so many ways that you can just hang out and do normal things. It's just with furries instead of bronies.
Yeah, I definitely, when the world opens back up and we can start doing that, I've definitely have my eye on some local ones when that can happen again. So things will have to wait until then.
I know.
So we've gone through the furry thing. What inspired you to get into yoga?
Stress.
What
inspired you to get into yoga?
What? Well, I guess, I'm not the one, I didn't go, become a certified yoga instructor. I feel like that's an extra step, as cool of a thing that it is. Like, what inspired you to go, I'm going to get certified in this?
Okay. So originally I was doing yoga as a child. It was probably not actual yoga, but it was like, there were poses, and I had books and stuff. Because again, book nerd, totally Twilight Sparkle. And and so one of the things that I did was I would do exercises like before bed and stretches, and those continued. And then I kind of dropped it off after college. And then I got super stressed, like I said, and it was work related, and it helped me to calm down. And I started to go to classes, and I realized, A, it's expensive, and B, I can do all of this. I'm a public speaker now, right? So this is 2 years ago.
Okay.
One of my resolutions was to find a yoga studio to go to. So I found a studio to go to, tons of free, like when the world opens up, tons and tons of free attendance to class, free weeks, free months, free sessions. Especially like in an urban area like Washington, D.C., where I am, I literally went to 3 months of classes and maybe paid $50.
Wow.
Like, it was insane. So again, when the world opens up, there will be lots of free samples. Enjoy them and take advantage of it. And so when I did that, I was like, would talk to the teachers of the styles that I like, which were slow, opening, meditative, really moving and feeling the movement more than doing fast or core or anything like that. And I would talk to them, and I said, hey, where did you come up with this? What did you do? And they say, oh, well, I got this book, or I have this teacher. And so because I got to know the teachers, I realized that A, you can learn it, same as speaking, and B, there are classes. And so then I was like, well, next year, resolutions, because again, resolutions, just goal setting. Instead of finding a studio, which I had found, then it was look into teacher training. And the price is the only thing that inhibited me at that point. But there are scholarships, especially for BIPOC people. There are also early bird discounts. And usually they have payments as well, like you do a payment plan. So I found one that worked for me, with teachers that worked for me, with a style that worked for me. And then I just like, cha-ching, I said, I'm going. This is my goal this year. It really all stemmed from the fact that I was confident, because I had been a public speaker, that I knew how to present. And all I had to do was present people moving their bodies. That's like the baby step, because I already knew how to move myself. I already knew how to speak myself. I just needed to know the elements of specifically presenting to instruct others on the use of their bodies through yoga.
Yeah, sounds like you had 70-80% of what you needed. You just needed that last little proper training of the poses. So that's cool. That makes sense. It clicks in. You are someone who is very goal oriented in the list. I feel like there's this reoccurring theme through all of these as you're talking of I made a goal to do this, and you made. Why are you laughing? It's it's super respectable. Not everybody has that. But the whole public, I have trouble public speaking. I'm going to take these classes. The yoga, going to conventions, you just going out and meeting new people. We haven't even touched on your art yet. Which I do want to talk about then, because freaking people who make art boggle my mind, and it's really cool. Where do you think that comes from? That's not, I don't want to say normal because that makes it sound mean. That doesn't come standard out of the box for a lot of people. They can say those things. I definitely have that sometimes. I feel like to an extent I have that somewhat, but it seems like you have such a directed fire about it, and it's super admirable. Where does that come from? Do you always have it every day? Does it come and go? How do you think and feel about it? I guess I don't know. Where does it come from? We'll start there.
Okay, I learned at a young age in school that it would help to keep me on track. I felt a lot of pressure from my parents to do well, and I'm sure a lot of us did. So it kind of led to that perfectionism syndrome. And again, I had no friends, so I had tons of time to study. And so lists would help me. I would literally, I'm that nerd that before school started, I would take all my classes and make the agenda and color code it. I learned very quickly that color coding things really helps me. I am a kinesthetic learner, so that means that I learn best by writing and repeating things and moving and doodling while I'm listening. Anything that my hands and that creative side of me can plug into. So color coding and making lists and writing lists and rewriting lists helps my brain to keep things in order. And this is not natural, but it's something that I've been doing for so long that it literally is a sanity line for me. If I don't have lists, I have apps, reminder apps to tell me when it's time to do stuff, because I can't remember. Some of this stuff is not easy. Adulting is not easy.
No.
And lists really help me.
No, but it's you talked about kind of that, being, force that perfectionist thing. And I feel like with a lot of people, as they grow older, that stops them from trying these new things, especially the things that scare them. I've seen it with people that I know. I've had it sometimes where it's just well, I don't take to this instantly, so I'm not going to do it. Yeah. And I want to get your reading on this. My understanding might be a little off, but it seems like that list, that having the list and just putting in, okay, I'm going to follow my list. I'm going to get these things done. And it's I picture it like this. It's I don't want to say a tank. It's treads. It's every time you finish something on the list, your little cart of progress moves a little bit. And it's little by little. And each individual one can maybe not feel like a lot, and it won't feel like progress, but when you've done enough of them, it's like we were talking about with all the presentations you've done. It's each individual one feels small, but when you look back, you're I put a lot of work in, and it's in those moments I feel that you can see all that progress.
Absolutely.
So, do you think that list of do you think that helps you? Because do you always I'm gonna shift to this more, I guess. Do you always personally feel like you have that fire of motivation? I feel like motivation is such a wonderful fire to motivate you, and when it goes out, at least that's my personal thing. So what's your thing on motivation? Do you find it easy to work on projects?
So the short answer is no. I'm going to tie it back to Agretsuko, Japanese version.
Go for it.
And again, apologize because I'm still learning Japanese, but at the end of most of the Japanese episodes, Agretsuko at the end says, "Ashita mo ganbaresa," which is, let's try hard again tomorrow. And that's she's punching her fist in the air, yeah, I mean, today sucks, but we got to try again tomorrow,
that's
right?
Very Japanese. Good old gambate. Try your best.
So that was it. That was how I totally felt. I'm not always motivated, but when I have a list, literally, I wake up, I look at my list, okay? But at the end of the day, it's that, did I check off something? Do I have a sense of achievement? And now maybe I think there might be something a little bit wrong, and it might not be normal for me, but let me tell you, when I have things done, it helps me to focus more. So checking things off, I actually keep a list of things I've done, right? So my achievements for the year. That positivity also helps you to say, hey, what have you done? Especially during this COVID time, right? Like it seems like a black hole. But if you have that list of 90 presentations, including Smooth Stream, all of a sudden you're like, oh.
That's like super admirable. Like you kind of were before, but you're kind of cementing like role model. Like that's like I have lists, but you are like keyed in. You have so many different plates spinning. It always seems like you're making progress on them, and it's like I wish I had that. Do you feel like I caught on this more, and this is kind of how I operate. So I want to see if it's similar. Do you feel like you get more done when you have more things to do, or that you want to get done? Like, feels like a silly way of like, well, of course you do more things when you have more things that need doing, but like, I find, and this is definitely, I have this at work really bad. It's like, if I just have one thing, I'll be really lazy. But if I'm juggling plates, everything is getting a lot more attention and work. Like, I'm just somehow more motivated. Or like at home, it's like, if I've got a lazy weekend where it's just work on this creative project, it usually doesn't happen. But if it's like, I have to run these errands, and I need to prep dinner, and I'm baking, and I also want to work on this, and it's just like, you know, it's very, not sink or swim. What's the word I want? It's very feast or famine, I feel like, with me, with motivation on doing projects and whatnot.
It's very interesting.
Do you feel like you just kind of have a consistent level, or do you kind of have a fluctuating?
So I'll say two things. The first one that you mentioned, procrastinating. Right, so procrastinating is like a generalized term for like, hey, there's other things I should be doing, but I also want to do this other thing. And so whenever I have multiple things, I will do something until I get bored of it and then do something else I'm supposed to do. So having more things means there's more other things I can do besides the things I'm supposed to do, which means something will actually get done because I'm going to be doing something. It just might not be one of the things that I'm actually trying to do. Yeah.
I feel seen. I'm in this picture with procrastinating, and I don't like it.
So the second thing I want to mention, just because if they're for listeners, like this is not for everyone. So I will tell you that my partner freaks out when they get reminders on their phone. Like if there is something saying, hey, you got to do this, they're like, I'm shutting you down and I am not doing it. So this works for my personality.
Yeah.
And everybody has to experiment with different ways of doing things, whether it's lists, or maybe there's a schedule, or maybe it's like leaving a shoe by your bed and that'll remind you to do something in the morning. Like there are 100 different ways that you can find to help to remind yourself to do things. And then you have to find the ways to motivate yourself as well. So for me, again, the achievement comes in checking things off the list and then seeing my finished list. And so I wanted to ask you, like, what's your motivation to get things done as well?
I mean, I definitely have lists. I like yours that you're like checking them off, but you can still see theirs. I have a whiteboard, and the more of it's filled up with things, the more I want to get it erased down. And right now I only have like a few things, so it's not, that fire is not burning as hot.
Yeah.
It comes and goes. Like some days we'll just be like, we're getting by, we're getting some things done, you wash some dishes, you do some laundry. And some days it's just like, I want to work on this creative project and I want to vacuum and I got to go out and buy groceries for that. Like, and it's just like the entire day is just fire on all cylinders. And sometimes it's procrastinating, and sometimes it's like, it's the weirdness that I can have a project that every day I go, I want to work on this more. Like I have a song that I'm working on that is like 60% done, and it's just like, just put the time in and it'll be done.
Yeah.
And I just keep not doing that. But it's like, I can have a silly idea to make a video that I'll make within like a couple hours time, within like a day span. And it's the entire, like, all of the steps, which is so much more complicated than just sitting down and working on the music of, like, okay, plan out the shots. What am I wearing? Get the green screen on. Make sure the lighting is good. Film it. Make sure that you didn't, exit the green screen. Upload it, edit it, and all that stuff. And it's like, why does it have to for at least me, it's like it's just like, why can it only work when I catch those updrafts?
Sure.
You know, I need to be able to, like, that's why I have like super like role model you, because it's like, it's that, at least from my viewpoint of, you know, kind of how I operate, is just like with those lists that you have this constant, like I said, it's that moving of the tank treads. It's like slow but consistent progress.
Sure.
And I don't always have that. It's very like feast or famine, and I need to like ride the updraft of like creative inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I
which
mean, there
creates
are.
a lot of like half done projects that don't see the light of day.
So what I'm hearing from you is, again, it's that passion, right? When you have the inspiration, when you have the ideas, it's a great feeling, and you should absolutely do it. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, that's, again, as you said, you work more efficiently when you're like totally gung ho. And again, I want to just mention like deadlines too, right? So there are times when I'm like pushing up and I have to get it done by a certain time. Deadlines are always inspirational, but as an adult, right, the balance is what is better to get done early versus what can you put off until the very end. Like taking out the trash a couple of days, it gets stinky, whatever. But if you've got like a doctor's appointment, or you need to do something that has a dependency on another life, whether it's a plant, a pet, another person, those kinds of things have different priorities, and that takes thinking about, right?
I mean, that's a very good point. And that's what makes it difficult for creative projects, which is that you are the deadline. There's
Yeah.
no, unless it's for a convention or for some sort of project, there's nothing that like there's nothing cracking the whip, so to speak. There's no sort of social structure that is like, I need to get this done. That's why cons were great, is that it's that I'm going to be there.
Deadline.
I throw out that I'm going to do these things, and I've learned from, even though I haven't had as many deadlines now as I used to back in school, it's like, I know everything will get done. I know me. I will not be able to fully relax until these things get done or progress gets made on them. But when there's not that deadline, there's no outside of myself reasoning for why it needs to be done a particular day. Yeah, it definitely has a tendency to fall by the wayside a little bit.
No, that's a perfect way of describing it. Thank you. And the other thing I want to say is that I'm not perfect, or if I am using My Little Pony terms, I'm not flawless, right? I have literally been spending the last 5 years decluttering because my parents taught me how to hoard, and I hoarded craft supplies. So let's swing it into the craft section really quickly, and the artistry and all of that.
Yeah, let's do it.
I saved so many like coloring pencils and erasers and ribbons and crayons and glue, and then I started getting into fabric when I got into sewing, and papers, letters, stationery, everything that could be creative. You buy it because it looks cool and you have an idea, but if you don't get to that project, literally 20 or 30 years, some of these things have been sitting around. And so I have been spending time going through the piles and trying to find things that spark me, right? So the first thing I did is like scrapbooking, so my photos and things like that. The next thing I'm going to do, similar to what Forward Progress is doing, is making those convention memento books, where I've got the convention book, photos, any kinds of souvenirs or things like that that I have.
Or something, yeah. They're really neat.
Yeah, so, and then I got to get into my drawing, which I literally have stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of ideas and doodles and things that I've sketched. And some of it was, sometimes you sketch stuff just to get better. Practice makes perfect. And that's one of the things I say, you've got to get into the habit if you want to get into art. And I want to do a lot of draw it agains, where you take something and you draw it again. So I've been doing that with some of my motivational posts. I just made a couple for Valentine's Day based on more recent ones. But as I go through them, that's kind of my personal motivation, is to see things that I can make into like a little, like an art book of things that I've made, redrawn, to capture these creative juices that were flowing at one point during my long life. So in my long life, I have collected way too much stuff. And this is a way, again, for me to declutter, it's that spring cleaning, the refreshing feeling of, I don't have all this junk weighing me down. What's important? What's inspiring me? And a lot of that is finding those old sparks of creativity. But again, without that deadline, they just sit. So I totally hear you. And that's kind of why, again, we'll go back to Smooth Stream, right? Having those even if it's just a fun convention with us, having those deadlines to do something makes a huge deal. So I'll tie it all together with a nice little bow. One of the things that I've been doing with my cosplay and yoga is I'm in a group called the Cosplaying Yogis. And we do projects where there is a deadline and we pretend like it's a convention, or we do a challenge online, something like that, where we have to make the cosplay, we have to plan out the poses, we have to do a routine, we have to do the outreach. And we're doing it out of the goodness of our own hearts, but we're also doing it because it's something to do. It's something to motivate. And then you have that happy feeling when things are posted and it's successful. And yeah, it's not a convention, but we'll get there. We'll get there. So finding something or a group of somebodies that will motivate you, that accountability buddy is what I like to call them. And so what I had done is in a craft group that we're in, we post once a week. There are things like the super art fight, things where people post and say, hey, what did you do with this theme this week? Embrace those. It's a way to be creative and to still have a deadline or something that makes you want to do things, because honestly, we all need inspiration right now. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. I feel like art is such a personal thing, and kind of like we were talking about with the making convention panels and presentations, and even just how you operate is just how people motivate themselves to do what they do, and even just how they get inspired to do that. I guess we'll jump off that. Is where do you find your inspiration, either in general or in specific? Like, what kind of fills your brain with ideas?
So it's really funny you say that, because one of the things I've spent years on professionally is finding my own ethos, my own inspiration. There's a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a totally nerdy, super, super popular book, and it's because it's true, and it worked for me. And it says, find what you want to do, what your life's purpose is. And yeah, this is like that lofty, crazy stuff again. But for me, when I thought about all of the things that I want to do, what you mentioned, Kermit, is exactly that. My ethos is I inspire.
I would agree with that.
So my inspiration is literally inspiring others. It can be through art. So this brings up my brand, right? So I am Riftwing Designs. I design everything, right? So I have these little mini brands, like Designs for Zen is yoga. And then it could be like designs for clothing. It could be graphic designs because I do art. And my newsletter is Designs for Confidence. So I have all these different mini brands in which I take my inspiration in all of the different flavors. And I then channel it into ways I can inspire people by sharing what I do and my lessons and my creativity. And I just hope that it helps other people to want to be themselves as well.
That's a really admirable, nice thing to be doing, Rift. It's like...
Yeah, and again, this took years. This took years and years and years for me to figure out. But that's what it takes. So start small. Just ask yourself those questions. It doesn't have to be 200 questions. But do those personality quizzes and really think, like, what is your favorite color and why? If you could spend your day with one person, what would it be and why? That kind of stuff.
That's a good point. I feel like we all kind of have our own little journeys of figuring ourselves out, and it's very fitting to the whole pony fighting your cutie mark thing of finding that thing that this is your thing that makes you special, or what you were drawn to, or any of that. And it feels somewhat cliched to bring up in that, but I think it is, we're seeing it here. I think it is legit to that extent of kind of finding your what does that motivation, and
literally
inspiring people is pretty cool, because mine is literally just like, I like to entertain people. I feel like that's an important but still kind of lesser version of that. What's the word I want? Not altruistic. It's less lofty. I don't know. I can't find the right word I want for it right now, but
it also takes more skill, because humor is very, very difficult to master.
I guess, I don't know. I feel like when you have to like reach out to somebody and get them to kind of like really resonate with something, it's easy to be it's easy to be funny off the cuff, but it's not as easy to be inspiring off the cuff, I feel like. But maybe I'm just saying things, I don't know.
Yeah, hey, we could fisticuff it in another episode.
Maybe, I don't know. It's something to think about. A random thought, I guess this isn't a question, but just sort of a passing along of information, because something you had said earlier when you were talking about public speaking and like how you approached it is, and just as a sort of sharing of ways to do it, is one thing that I learned that I will always remember from now the late shoot, gosh, I'm gonna lose his name. Larry King, I believe, who has recently passed, which is real sad, but I will always remember. I don't even remember where it was, just some probably clip of him talking on YouTube, of him talking about when he got into, you know, interviewing or just like being like, I think he used to be in the news or something. And it's like, when you have that moment that you don't know what to talk about, just describe the scene you're in. Just describe the situation. And for some reason, that always brought me, even if it's not something I consciously would do, it always brought me a lot of peace of mind in those moments of like, if I don't know what to say, just describe like what's going on or how I'm feeling or just random thoughts going through my brain, like just something instead of, you know, shock or dead air or something. And I feel like that helps me kind of roll with things in the moment of like, I always have that life preserver even if I never have to really use it.
Absolutely. We teach that in Toastmasters too. There is a value in not having that dead air, as you said, right? In continuing to think on your feet and making sure that other people can figure it out too. Because generally, nobody wants to see anyone fail. Nobody wants to see anybody like really struggling, whether it's on stage or in a podcast or just, you know, in work. So when you're able to at least work your way through it, they can be like, yeah, as opposed to like, oh God, this is so awkward. Like just do something, right?
Yeah, you just want to reach out to those people. And I guess that's like the inspire thing. Have you ever had that when you've seen somebody like doing a panel and you just kind of wish they weren't as nervous, I guess? Like you're cheering for them, but it's just like, oh no.
And generally, most of the folks up there have done well. One of the tips that I will give in for the audience here is just never apologize. Things happen, mistakes happen. You might forget where you are, but that again doesn't detract. And not only that, but there are some people that, including myself, used to apologize way too much for anything just to take the blame or to try and cover up. And that's a skill too, right? So I think that the biggest issue I've seen with anyone on stage, even people that interview voice actors, is when they're apologetic. I understand it comes from a very sincere place in your heart. But when you're on the stage or when you're recording, there is a time and a place for being confident and continuing on. And there is a time and a place afterwards to be sincere and apologize for anything that needs apologizing for. And unless you actually did something offensive, making a mistake on your own is no problem whatsoever. Oftentimes people will cover that with the self-deprecating humor, which is okay in a level, but again, self-deprecation is not a healthy habit either.
Yeah, I had to tell that. That was a big part of my my talk with Thoth in episode 1, is he is someone who's very keen on beating himself up for comedy's sake, and it's like, there is comedy here, but also make sure you're taking care of yourself. You were saying,
themes.
Did I hear correctly saying that you used to have that problem of over-apologizing?
Oh, yeah.
How did you get over that?
I left home.
Oh, gosh.
I took blame because I was the eldest child, and at some point it was just, if anybody got upset, I was like, let me do it because I don't want anyone upset. I am the nicest person in the world. I'm peaceful. I want Zen, kumbaya forever. Like, there is no conflict in me. I've totally wiped it from my body. If I get angry, there is something seriously wrong, okay? I'm like She-Hulk, like it's crazy. So I quickly found out that my place was definitely not getting emotional. And if I could help other people not be emotional just by taking the blame, I did. And that was very unhealthy.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even know you had siblings.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oldest of?
Well, 3 girls total, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. I feel like that's something in general. There's just a lot of people you meet that you just like they had siblings, and that has such an impact on how they grew up, but it's never like oh yeah, I've got like a brother or sister that, like, I don't know, that's something, like right now, like I've known you for a while and we've talked about stuff, but it's like, I never knew you had siblings before.
Yeah. We just need to, again, have that convention room chat at some point. But yeah, it all ties together. Like, I think some of my perfectionism also came from being the eldest child, all that, but like blah, blah, blah. We can talk mental health at some other point. I definitely had my ways, and I've recognized that some of those were not as healthy, and that's something that you always continue to take care of yourself.
Yeah, finding those kind of patterns and things you fell into back then, just to kind of keep things, like you said, keeping the peace. And not just in your case, in a lot of cases, I know I've got stuff and I know other people have had that. And when you can finally exit it going like, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't need to be this way. But no, thank you for all this. I guess my one big final question, as we're reaching up to about an hour now, what is next for Riftwing Designs? You've got your art, you've got your presentations, you've got your yoga that you are now certified for throughout this, being stuck inside this pandemic. What's the next big, I know it's kind of complicated with the world being the way it is, but what's the next big thing that you've got on the horizon, something you're hopeful for Riftwing?
All right, thank you, Kermit. You're going to love this one. The next big thing is to not be a big thing. And my challenge, and this is something that's really come out because of all of the time we've spent quarantining and staying safe at home, is I continue to call myself back to doing things that I like and not doing it for the likes.
You say that that's not big, but that's big.
It's so hard.
That's very difficult.
It is so hard. It is so hard to not want a brand. It is so hard to want to get the likes and the hashtags and the this and the that's. And so, as you've been seeing on my Instagram, I'm posting everything. I'm not making a separate cosplay page. I'm not making a separate art page. I'm throwing up there what I want to put up there. And that includes pictures of skulls and mushrooms. And it includes flowers and rainbows. And it includes art and cosplay. And it includes yoga and bronies and furries. And I am being myself. And I am sure at some point, and I don't know when, but at some point, there's going to be a landslide of people realizing that influencers do too much and nobody can keep up with them if you are not already up there. It's literally more than a full-time job, and it's stressful and it's not fun.
No.
And we have to have fun, and we have to enjoy what we do, and we have to do what we love.
That's a very beautifully put thing, and like you said, that is a very tough thing to do. Gosh, I hate that we're out of time, and I also know Forward has talked a lot about doing a social media episode, so it sounds like we gotta rope you into that one when we can finally sit down and record it, because
you know it.
You've got a lot of personal experience with it, so I think that's really interesting. So now that we're at our end, Rift, is there anything you'd like to plug, pimp, or otherwise tell people about before we say sayonara?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for sticking around this long. Again, I am Riftwing Designs of Riftwing Designs, and that's everywhere on social media. And if you don't see me there, let me know, because I'm definitely one that loves outreach. I like to hear from people. I like to take suggestions. I like to interact with folks, and especially working, again, with Keeping Friendship Magic, Smooth Stream, your interviews, and the Kermit Zone. It is a pleasure, so I am glad to continue to interact with all of you in the future.
Fantastic, thank you. And she did not say it, but she has a lovely yoga that she does the last Saturday of every month.
Yes.
That is cosplay themed, and they have been helping keep me sane and generally in shape during this quarantine. So go check her out at twitch.tv/Riftwing Designs.
Yep, and I've got Riftwing Designs on YouTube if you want the replays.
Which are also fantastic for those weeks in between when you're needing that little extra bit of yoga zen in your life. So thank you, Rift. You've been an incredible guest, and until next time, then thank you for joining us.
All right.
In the Grog Zone.
A huge thank you to our patrons, SamuDash, Frenchie McHugh, Riftwing Designs, Statman Dan, and Jason Kuzmak. Without your support, this project wouldn't be possible.